a horror movie to leave its mark, it needs to give audiences something they haven't seen before. This is easier said than done, since the genre has a nasty habit of being formulaic and predictable. But while adapting an iconic story or concluding a franchise, filmmakers know they can't churn out the same old, same old. As such, they may decide to approach a movie in a way no one could have possibly expected. Although this is risky, it can pay off big time. Other times, bucking the trend is the worst move possible. Some horror films try too hard to subvert expectations to the point where they come across as nonsensical, unintentionally hilarious, or outright insulting to long-term fans. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 horror films that tried something different and failed. Number 10. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. After the Blair Witch Project made over 10,000 times its budget, a follow-up was rushed into development a year later. Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2 may have an avalanche of problems, but there's one flaw that towers above the rest. It ditched the found footage motive. This decision was so absurd, it seemed like the filmmakers didn't understand what made the film special in the first place. The Blair Witch Project didn't break the bank because it was scary, but because the film within a film angle made it feel authentic. You know, the filmmakers did something right, considering there were plenty of horror fans who thought this documentary was the real deal. Without the found footage style, there's nothing to differentiate Book of Shadows from any other paranormal flick. For the most part, it feels like a completely different movie that was tweaked into a Blair Witch sequel at the last minute. Also, the camera work is somehow worse than in the previous entry, where it was deliberately bad. Number 9. Diary of the Dead. A mere 2 years after George J. Romero's Land of the Dead bombed, the visionary director tried again, with a found footage reboot called Diary of the Dead. This installment follows a group of film students who record the zombie uprising as it's happening, hoping to turn the footage into a lucrative documentary. Now, some fans might assume Romero took the found footage approach purely because it was trendy. However, the legendary author had intended to make a low-budget horror centered around emerging media for years, and saw Diary of the Dead as the perfect vehicle to explore this notion. Sadly, none of Romero's passion comes through in the finished product. The footage keeps cutting between multiple cameras, so it looks more like a standard horror flick than a documentary. All the shots appear too planned and organized, robbing the scenes of any naturalism or spontaneity. Unlike Land of the Dead, this reboot isn't just a disappointment. Diary of the Dead is so shoddily put together, viewers would never suspect it was made by the same man who pioneered the zombie genre in the first place. Number 8. 2019's Child Play. Even though the Chucky TV series has been killing it recently, the Child's Play movies haven't been great since, well, Child's Play. So, when it was announced the 2019 reboot would put a modern spin on the franchise, it didn't sound like the worst idea in the world. With Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill, providing the vocals of the killer doll, this reimagining seems surprisingly promising. Conceptually, Child's Play has a lot going for it. Rather than sticking with the outdated voodoo shtick, Chucky is now an AI unit called the Buddy. By monitoring his surroundings, Chucky is constantly learning so he can be a better companion for his owner, Andy. But since his safety protocols were deactivated before shipping, Chucky becomes violent, killing everyone he deems a threat to Andy. On the surface, this sounds like a neat idea. However, it becomes impossible to suspend your disbelief when Chucky inexplicably becomes a tech god, controlling phones, television, lights, cameras, and drones. Not only does this development jump the shark, it doesn't make sense how the toy manufacturers accidentally programmed the Buddy dolls to go full Skynet. Number 7. 1998's Psycho. What makes Gus Van Sant's Psycho different from other remakes is the fact it's not different at all. Rather than putting his own stamp on Alfred Hitchcock's masterful slasher, the Good Will Hunting director decided to make the exact same film. Though there were some diversions from the original, 1998's Psycho is effectively a shot-for-shot reskin. As a result, it's baffling to understand why this do-over was made in the first place. Overall, it feels stilted and mechanical since every shot is designed to match its 1960 counterparts. The acting isn't organic since the cast are imitating the performances of the original ensemble. Above all else, viewers are constantly taken out of the story because they can't help but compare it. If Van Sant's Psycho keeps reminding viewers of Hitchcock's vastly superior version, they'll just want to watch that instead. And if a movie urges viewers to switch it off to watch another movie, that's not a great sign. Number 6. Dracula 2000. When adapting Count Dracula, filmmakers do what they can do to deliver a unique take on the iconic vampire. And then, Dracula 2000 came along and proposed one of the most daring reinventions of the neck-chomping Count yet. In this modern adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel, Drac is revealed to be none other than Judas Iscariot. After betraying Jesus Christ for 30 pieces of silver, God punished the former apostle by making him immortal. This twist is pretty cool since it explains why the Prince of Darkness has never been a fan of silver or Christian paraphernalia. Unfortunately, the film is let down by everything else. Due to the bad wigs, costumes, script, special effects, and performances, Dracula 2000 feels like a parody. Dracula Dead and Loving It took the source material more seriously. Also, the way it subtly emulates the look and feel of The Matrix makes Dracula 2000 look embarrassingly dated. Number 5. Jason Goes to Hell in The Final Friday. Since Jason Goes to Hell was intended to be the Friday the 13th's final installment, the filmmakers knew they had to do something bold. In the movie's defense, it grabs viewers' attention straight away since Jason Voorhees is executed in the first 5 minutes. Sadly, it's all downhill after that. In the following scene, it's revealed that Jason's soul is harbored inside a demonic slug called the Hell Baby. Yes, that is its actual name. When the coroner exhumes Jason's corpse, the devilish critter burrows into its body, allowing the hockey mask-wearing maniac to continue his killing spree. Throughout the film, Jason transfers his consciousness from one person to another, slaughtering everyone he encounters. The machete-wielding brute eventually reverts to his original form, but only during the climax. Although the series has had its fair share of silly moments, nothing competes with this pointless retcon. Number 4. Don't Breathe 2. In Don't Breathe, Rocky and her friends break into the home of blind man Norman, played by Stephen Lang, hoping to steal his fortune. When Norman proves to be anything but helpless, Rocky and her mates do everything they can to escape. Although Feder Alvarez forced a masterfully tense thriller, it's Lang's career-defining performance that makes the movie work so well. Despite being a terrifying force to be reckoned with, the Avatar star manages to convey Norman as a deeply tragic and sympathetic figure. After Don't Breathe's critical and financial success, a sequel was greenlit. Much like Terminator 2, it was decided to flip the script, with Norman playing the hero this time around. Despite the fact Don't Breathe 2 has a heartfelt story and Lang is on top form again, the whole thing falls flat since Norman doesn't work as anything except a villain. In Don't Breathe's climax, viewers learn that Norman has impregnated the woman who accidentally killed his daughter, intending to replace his deceased child with her newborn. And once you see Norman try to inseminate Rocky with a turkey baster full of his own semen, you can never see him as anything but the baddie. No matter how much Don't Breathe 2 tries to paste Norman as honourable and pure, it absolutely does not undo the evil that he committed in the past. Number 3. Spiral. Since Jigsaw, played by Tobin Bell, was introduced in Saw as a man riddled with terminal cancer, it was obvious the puppet-obsessed killer wouldn't be sticking around for long. However, Bell was so captivating in the role, the filmmakers weren't ready to say goodbye to him, even after Jigsaw popped his clogs in Saw 3. To get around this, Jigsaw returned in future installments through a series of flashbacks. But as the sequels continued to decline in quality, it was obvious having Jigsaw pop up for 5 minutes was not enough to save the series. When interest started drying up, Chris Rock stepped in to give the property a fresh start. Rather than dwelling on Jigsaw's legacy like the later Saw sequels, Chris Rock's soft reboot, Spiral, focused on a brand new killer. But due to the forgettable traps, Rock's miscasting, an underwhelming villain, and a predictable twist, the film failed miserably to reinvigorate the franchise. Also, it wasn't the same without Jigsaw. Unsurprisingly, the follow-up, Saw X, went back to basics, making Jigsaw central to the story once more. Considering how critically and financially successful this latest installment has been, it further proves how silly it was for Spiral to exclude John Kramer. Number 2. Prometheus. When looking back on Alien's disappointing sequels and embarrassing crossovers, there was no question that the beloved sci-fi saga lost its way. So, when the original director, Ridley Scott, promised to revitalise the franchise he created with a prequel called Prometheus, it wasn't just welcome, but needed. Instead of whipping up another space monster movie, Scott's vision was far grander. Since Prometheus would explore the creation of humanity, the origin of life, God, and the Xenomorph's history, it sounded like Scott's most ambitious project yet. However, the Blade Runner director put such a heavy focus on epic storytelling, he neglected to make a coherent narrative. Simply put, Prometheus feels like faulty ideas crammed together, most of which are half-explained. Plot holes pop up with such frequency, it's hard to understand how they weren't ironed out in the first draft. Even though there are moments where the plot could easily connect with the original, it refuses to. Wouldn't it make sense if the events took place on the same moon Ripley's crew visited in Alien, considering the space jockey, his vessel, and a proto-xenomorph reside there? Alien 3 and Resurrection may have been bad, but nothing diluted the Alien name as much as this dud. And number 1, Halloween Ends. Halloween Ends wasn't just the last installment of David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy, it was the conclusion of a story that's been built up since John Carpenter redefined the slasher genre back in 1978. After 44 years and 13 movies, Laurie Strode would face off against her nemesis, Michael Myers, for the last time, for now. Since it was the end of an era, fans suspected Halloween Ends would do something totally unexpected so it would leave a lasting impact on die-hard fans. Although Halloween Ends had something up its sleeve, it wasn't something people suspected or wanted. Basically, Michael Myers, as in the overarching villain of the franchise, is barely in this movie. Despite what the promos, posters, and trailers had fans believe, Halloween Ends' central antagonist is Corey Cunningham, a resident of Haddonfield who's been shunned by the townsfolk after he accidentally killed a child. After being reviled by society, Corey loses his mind and becomes Michael Myers' partner and potential successor. Even though this is an intriguing idea, it's nonsensical to have Michael sidelined, especially since this is the last time audiences will see this version of him. And that sums up our list of 10 horror films that tried something different and failed. If you can think of any more, then let us know in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a cheeky like, share and subscribe too. I've been Jem from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you next time.